Hey, what's going on, guys? Brian Kelly here from Zombie Guitar. Here in today's video, I want to give you a structured 8-week course that gives you specific things to focus on 1 week at a time for a total of 8 weeks, with the ultimate goal to help you to improvise and to help you to write solos. So you could essentially consider this video to be a sequel to my previous video that I did about a year ago called Solo Like a Pro in 8 weeks. If you haven't already seen that video, check that out. I'll post a link to that below. I'll also put a link here in the video if you're watching this video on YouTube. The primary difference between the previous video and today's video, even though they're both structured 8-week courses, the previous video is about layer 1, this video is about layer 2. So when it comes to improvising, when it comes to writing solos, anything regarding lead guitar, there's always 2 layers. The first layer is the scale, the second layer is the chord tones. There's always going to be that 2-layer approach. So in Solo Like a Pro in 8 weeks, once you determine the key, you apply the correct scale pattern to the key. Within the scale pattern, there's certain notes that you can bend that are going to sound good when you bend, very common bends. Essentially, I give you a roadmap of how to solo in key. That's what the previous video is about. That doesn't really pay much attention to the underlying chords, though. So the stuff that's taught in Solo Like a Pro in 8 weeks, you could take that stuff and you can apply it to any chord progression because it's just focusing on the scale patterns. All right? There's this whole other world out there, though. There's this layer 2. There's this chord tone stuff. This is where the magic happens. All right? Layer 2, focusing on the chord changes, this is where the magic happens. All right, so here in week 1, you're going to have 2 goals. One of the goals is like, it's not a big deal. It's kind of like you should already know how to do this if you're watching this video. If you don't already know how to do this, then go back and watch the previous video, Solo Like a Pro in 8 weeks. The 2 goals for week 1 are, number 1, just once you know the key, I'm already going to tell you the key is A minor. So once you know that you're in the key of A minor, just noodle around in the pentatonic scale, and we're going to essentially use the same roadmap that we used in the previous video. So for the key of A minor, your pentatonic position number 1 is right here in between frets 5 and 8. And then you also have the same thing up here between frets 17 and 20. So we're going to add the lower and upper extension on there as well. So this is coming from pentatonic position 5. This is coming from pentatonic position number 2. So you basically can do some diagonal runs and stuff like that. And of course, the same thing applies up here as well. So that's going to be the roadmap. That's where we're going to be working at the entire time. Up there, up there. So for week 1, just focus on noodling around within this roadmap. Like I said, this shouldn't really be a big deal. If you did the previous video, that's the same roadmap that we used. What I really want you to focus on for this week is I want you to understand chord functions within a key. So the actual chord progression that we're soloing over in today's video is going to be an A minor chord, to a G major chord, to a D minor chord, to an A minor chord. All right, so what do I mean by chord function within a key? Well, if you ever see the Roman numeral stuff, you know, the 1 chord, the 2 chord, the 3 chord, all that kind of stuff, you need to be aware of the chords function within a key. So another video that I did, it's called The 2 Perspectives of Numbering Chord Progressions. There, you can number a chord progression from the major perspective or the minor perspective. Check that video out too if you don't understand the difference. Basically, within the key of A minor, that's the same key signature as C major. Even though there's no C major chord involved in this progression, these chords all come from the key signature of C major. So if you're numbering this chord progression from the major perspective, the A minor chord would be the 6 chord, the G major chord would be the 5 chord, the D minor chord would be the 2 chord. So this is a 6-5-2 progression if you're numbering from the major perspective. If you're numbering from the minor perspective, in which you want to call the A minor chord the 1 chord, like your tonal center should be the 1 chord, purely minor perspective, then that's fine. You can call the A minor chord the 1 chord. You then have to renumber the rest of the chords accordingly, though. So if A minor is the 1 chord, that would make your G major chord to be the flat 7 chord. That would make the D minor chord to be the 4 chord. It makes zero difference what you label these chords. This is just in your head. This is on paper. It's not going to sound one bit of difference to the audience. To the people listening to this stuff, they're not going to be like, hey, that should be a 1 chord. Why is he calling it a 6 chord? The people listening are not going to know the difference. This is purely for your own knowledge, all right? I find it much easier to simply just refer to the circle of fifths and see the positioning within the grouping of 6 where each chord falls. So we're in the key signature of C major, which is the same key signature as A minor. So the A minor chord falls in the inner circle center position. The G major chord is outer circle clockwise position. The D minor chord is inner circle counterclockwise position. So if I want to take this chord progression, if I want to take that chord progression and I want to transpose it to another key, let's say I want to play it in the key signature of E minor, which is the same key signature as G major. I could refer to my grouping of 6 on the circle of fifths, keeping everything within the same position within the grouping of 6. So that same progression played in this other key would be like this. So it's the same chord progression, it's just transposed to another key. Week 1's goal, aside from just noodling around in this roadmap, this pentatonic roadmap, understand chord functions within the key, make sure that you get that stuff down, make sure you check out that lesson that I linked you to. Let's get on to week 2. Week 2 is about adding in the diatonic notes and making sure that you know the difference between which notes are pentatonic and which notes are not pentatonic. So in the key of A minor, that's what we're playing in for this lesson here. Your A minor pentatonic scale. The pentatonic scale is just 5 notes. This initial roadmap that we looked at, even though it spans across 6 strings and it covers a bunch of fretboard area, it's still just 5 notes. The notes of the A minor pentatonic scale are A, C, D, E, and G. So we've just looked at A's, C's, D's, E's, and G's so far. There's still 2 more notes though if you want to play the full A minor scale, otherwise known as the diatonic scale, the full 7-note scale. You have to figure out where those additional 2 notes fall into play. So if you just want to add in the diatonic notes on the high 3 strings like we did in Solo Like a Pro in 8 weeks, that's fine. Focus on the pentatonic scale, focus on this roadmap, focus on adding in the diatonic notes on just the high 3 strings. If you want to go ahead and add in the diatonic notes on the lower strings too, on the low E string and the A string, that's fine. Typically when I'm soloing, I'm more on the high strings than I am on the lower strings, so any addition of diatonic notes that I would be adding would be done on the higher strings. So it's really up to you. The main thing is just get comfortable with this roadmap here, the lower extension, pentatonic position 1, the upper extension. Get comfortable with soloing into this roadmap and make sure that you understand the difference between which notes are pentatonic and which notes are outside of the pentatonic, but still part of the overall key. That's the goal for week 2. The goal for week 3 is to practice in small isolated areas. So within this roadmap, just play around here for a little while. Just maybe choose just these 4 notes. Whatever, just noodle around there over the backing track that you're playing along with. Small little area. Once you get comfortable with that area, jump up to another small isolated area. Maybe something like this. Alright, just noodle around in that area the entire time. Let the backing track play for a couple minutes. Just focus on that one isolated area. We're not chord tone targeting yet. Use your ear. Just noodle, 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 but focus just on this one little isolated area. For the demo that I'm about to show you, my isolated area is this. All right, so now we're going to start chord tone targeting. So from week 4 all the way to week 8, you're going to be chord tone targeting, but we're going to focus on one single thing at a time. That way it doesn't overwhelm you. The objective for week 4 here is to just whatever you're doing, whatever noodling you're doing, whatever phrases you're playing, whatever licks you're coming up with, whatever your improvs are, make it so that every time the A minor chord comes back around, you're landing on the note A. All right, so the A minor chord is a very important chord within the key of A minor. That's the tonal center chord. The other chords, we'll worry about them later. For right now, we're just focusing on the A minor chord. We're focusing on chord tone targeting for the A minor chord. So what to do for the A minor chord? Target the note A, which is a chord tone of the A minor chord. That is your goal for week 4. If you are a member of the Zombie Guitar website, this video here has a website version, just as the Solo Like a Pro in 8 Weeks also has a website version as well. The website version of these YouTube lessons, they come with a bunch of extra videos, written lesson, fretboard diagrams. It gives you specific things to focus on 1 week at a time with visual aids and backing tracks and stuff like that. So the website version of this lesson right here, it's going to be on the Zombie Guitar website in about 2 or 3 days or something like that. Solo Like a Pro, the website version, it's been up there for a year now, so that's old news. Anyway, let's get into the lesson. The goal for week 5 is to chord tone target another chord tone of the A minor chord. The A minor chord, again, is a very, very important chord. It is the tonal center chord. Therefore, this would be, of all the chords within the progression, this would be the most important chord to be doing chord tone targeting to. All right, so the note we're going to be focusing on now is going to be the third. So an A minor chord consists of the notes A, C, and E. A is the root, C would be the minor third, E would be the fifth. So root, minor third, perfect fifth, that's what makes up a minor chord, A, C, and E. Anytime you are chord tone targeting, the third of the chord that you're targeting is always going to be, it's going to be the prettiest note. That's the best way I can describe it. The third just has that beautiful, beautiful, pretty sound. The other, the root and the fifth, they also sound nice. They sound very connected to the chord. There's just something about that third, though. It just sounds so David Gilmour. It's the best way I can describe it. David Gilmour-esque, you know? Those thirds, they're so pretty. So the third of the A minor chord is the note C. So every time this chord progression goes back around and it lands on the A, time your phrases so that you're hitting the note C. Speaking of David Gilmour, the goal of week 6 is to bend to chord tones of the A minor chord. All right. Again, this A minor chord is the tonal center. This is the most important chord to do the chord tone targeting to. That's not to say to ignore the other chords completely. I'm just saying that taking this on a structured, focused way with the ultimate goal of getting you to understand how to chord tone target, the first thing to focus on would be the tonal center chord. So in the key of A minor, the A minor chord has a little bit more importance than the other chords. So the objective here is to bend to chord tones in the same way, and you're still timing it so that it happens at the moment that the A minor chord occurs. So every time the A minor chord comes back around, you can bend this note right here, which is the 7th fret of the G string. Bend that by a whole step. If you bend that note by a whole step, you're going to be hitting the note E right here. That E is also found here. So if you bend that note by one whole step, you're going to be hitting the note E. The chord tones of the A minor chord are A, C, and E. So that is always going to be bending to a chord tone. If you bend this note right here, the 8th fret of the B string, if you bend that by a whole step, you're going to be achieving this note right here, which is the note A. A can also be found there. The note A is a chord tone of the A minor chord, A, C, and E. So if you bend that note by a full step, you're going to be chord tone targeting. If you bend this note right here, the note that's on the 10th fret of the B string, if you bend that by 1.5 steps, so that's going to be a pretty big bend. That's the same bend that you hear in the intro to Hotel California, the very first bend in the Hotel California solo. So that's the beginning of Hotel California. That's in the key of B minor. But that big bend that he's doing, that's on the B string. That's that 1.5 step bend. We're just in the key of A minor now, so we're shifting our pentatonic down by, one whole step. The same bend. So that bend right there, that 1.5 step bend, that's taking you up to this note right here. That's the note C. You also have a C here. So when you bend that note by 1.5 steps, you are bending to a chord tone of the tonal center chord, which in this case is A minor. So you're bending to the note C. That's a very important bend to know about as well. You can also get to the note C by coming up here on the 7th fret of the high E string, bend that by just a half step. That'll take you up to the note C as well. That's a nice little half step bend. I love those half step bends. You can also come up to the 10th fret of the high E string and bend that by a whole step. That will be achieving this note right here, which is the note E. A, C, and E are the chord tones of the A minor chord. So that is also going to get you to a chord tone. So for week 7, we're going to be focusing on the G chord. In week 8, we're going to be focusing on the D minor chord. Each of these chords is only going to get 1 week of its own, not because they're not important. It's just that the tonal center chord, the A minor chord, is a little bit more important than all the rest, just because that's the tonal center chord. If you're going to chord tone target at all, that would be the one that you place your emphasis on. You can still make some magic happen by paying attention to the other chords too, and that's what this is all about. So one thing to understand, back to that circle of fifths thing, back to the grouping of 6. When you're looking at your chords in the grouping of 6, the chords that are in the center position, the chord tones of those chords are also going to be pentatonic notes. So if you're looking at the notes of the pentatonic scale, if you're looking at the chord tones of the A minor chord, A, C, and E, those are all pentatonic notes. So when you're just sticking to pentatonic, there's a good chance you're also going to be hitting chord tones of the A minor chord. If a C major chord was thrown in there, that's also center position of the circle of fifths. The chord tones of the C major chord are C, E, and G. C, E, and G, those are all pentatonic notes. So chord tone targeting, over a C major chord within this key, just sticking to pentatonic, there's a good chance you're going to be chord tone targeting if you just stick to pentatonic. When it comes to other chords that are on the left or the right of the center chords, those chords are always going to have one note that falls out of the pentatonic. That's going to be your magical note. So, and even if it's a chord that's like, if it's an out of key chord or something like that, you can always look at the chord that's out of key, and there's always going to be a special note about that chord, and it's not really going to be too hard to find. You look at that chord, you look at the notes of your key scale, be like, oh, that's the note of that chord. That's really the note I kind of want to focus on. That's going to be the note that really brings out the flavor of that particular chord. We're just sticking 100% in key for this lesson. but the same concept applies. So for the G major chord, the chord tones are G, B, and D. So the notes G and D are both pentatonic notes, but that note B, that note falls out of the pentatonic a bit. So every time that G major chord comes up, if you hit that note B, that means you're sliding out of the pentatonic to this direction, in the direction of the headstock of the guitar. Slide out of the pentatonic a bit, hit that note B. Every time that G major chord comes up, it's going to have that David Gilmour effect. And then the final chord is the D minor chord. Same thing. The notes are D, F, and A. So the note D and the note A are both pentatonic notes, but that note F, that's the note that falls out of the pentatonic. That's going to be your note of focus. That's going to be that magical note. That's not to say that other notes, if you play the D note or you play the A note, those are still going to be chord tones. Those are going to be pentatonic notes. They're still going to sound good over the D minor chord. But there's just that one note that's coming out of the pentatonic. If you're going to leave the pentatonic scale, do so with a purpose. And that's what we're doing here. All right, so that's it. That's the 8 weeks. If you do this 8-week process and you practice one single chord progression and you focus on that one single chord progression for 8 weeks and you do a step-by-step, 1 week at a time, one specific goal for each week, you're going to get really, really, really good at that one single chord progression. Our pentatonic position number 1 was right here for A minor. If you want to play this exact same thing in the key of, say, B minor, you just move your pentatonic position to here. You still have your lower extension, your upper extension. All the same type of chord tone targeting is going to occur. All the same bends are going to be in the same place. So once you master this progression one time, you can then do this in any key. You're going to be really, really good at a 6-5-2 progression. There's only so many progressions, It's all about just understanding what type of progression that you are soloing over, though. So if you guys like this video, stop by, check out my website, zombieguitar.com. It's tons and tons of cool stuff on there. A site I've been working on for about 7 years now. Don't plan on stopping anytime soon. Today's lesson is going to be on the Zombie Guitar website, as I said, but it's going to also include 8 additional videos with it, plus a written lesson. That's just in addition to all the stuff that's already on there. I also have a Patreon page, patreon.com/zombie guitar. I add about 2 videos per week to my Patreon page. I have about 56 videos on there, something like that. By the end of 2022, I intend to have about 150 videos because I add 2 videos per week typically. So if everything keeps up as it is, I should have about 150 or more videos by the end of 2022. That's my Patreon page. It's a lot of Q&A I do on there. People ask me questions. I make videos in response. So yeah, check that out too. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time.